I'm from the UK, as you might be able to tell from my accent, but I'm currently based in Singapore. And I'm thrilled to be here today discussing the ways in which marketers can leverage and uncertainty in the market right now. Now, we've got quite a bit of content to get through, to whip through in the next 25 minutes, but we should hopefully have around 5 minutes left for questions at the end. So please, as Shani mentioned, feel free to add any questions in the chat as we go along. And thank you again for the poll. As mentioned, it was an interesting response. Hopefully we can cover a few pointers to help address how we can maintain that rating or even improve it during this session. So without further ado, I'm excited to kick things off. And I thought it might be useful to tell you a little bit about Oracle Data Cloud's recent entry into the Indian market. But firstly, let's address who exactly are Oracle Data Cloud. Now, over the past several years, Oracle has invested billions of dollars acquiring some of the industry's leading ad tech companies, including BlueKai, where I used to work, Datalogix, Advis, Crosswise, Moat, and most recently, Grapeshot, who power what we now call Oracle's Contextual Intelligence solution. Now, today, these acquisitions and the solutions that they power form the Oracle Data Cloud. But what exactly, you might be wondering, are we in business to do? In short, we're in business to make brand advertising more effective online. And we believe that solving this problem is a journey, not a destination. Data optimization is a constant evolution, and with every campaign exists the potential to transform your digital strategy towards better outcomes. And we know that in India, there's already a lot of digital campaigns, and there's going to be even more over the next few years because digital is still a rapidly growing industry. This particular chart from eMarketer shows a further 65% increase in digital ad spend in this market over the next 3 years. But the only way this growth happens is if brands have the confidence to invest more of their ad dollars in digital. And we suspect they will, since the size of the prize is substantial. E-commerce continues to grow as more and more people are buying things online, especially during a global pandemic. This chart indicates that more than a quarter of the population in India will make an online purchase next year, and that's over 300 million people. But what I find even more remarkable is that over 1/3 of the population will be shopping online by the end of next year, rising to nearly 40% in 2023. Maybe not buying, but definitely comparing brands they're considering to purchase, which means there's a great opportunity for advertising to influence consumers in digital today. So with that backdrop in mind, let's dive in and take a look at some of the digital media challenges. Move on to the topic of data in a post-cookie world and understanding the true impact of advertising. Now, the fundamental goal of digital media, as we probably all know, is to win the attention of relevant consumers. But in today's fragmented media landscape, consumers have more choice than they've ever had. On average, people have about 5 different devices, meaning that marketers have to elevate their approach to reaching people in the right environment in order to capture the right level of attention. There's also no shortage of content. Publishers are constantly having to reinvent the ways that they think about creating and distributing content in order to keep their audiences engaged. And with more and more supply, the time spent consuming digital media is also at an all-time high. Across social channels, streaming music, online video, gaming, and entertainment, we're faced with the reality that people have access to more media than they could ever possibly consume in their entire lifetime. It's also worth noting that a growing amount of this content now lives on platforms that are subscription-based and therefore advertising-free. Netflix, for example, spent over $15 billion on programming last year, and the advent of new streaming services from the likes of Apple and Disney further increases this pool and means that capturing the attention of your core audience to create brand impact is more complex than it's ever been. I think a study conducted by Microsoft illustrates the challenge with capturing consumer attention perfectly. Their goal was to determine how long people could focus on one thing for a specific amount of time. And what they found was that the average person in the year 2000 held their focus to roughly 12 seconds. 15 years later, this had dropped by a third to around 8 seconds, which alarmingly is only 1 second less than the attention span of a goldfish. Unsurprisingly, the timing of this study correlated strongly to wider mobile phone adoption and an increase in social media networks and online video sharing. I hope that you guys are going to be able to keep your attention for a little bit longer than 8 seconds. We've got another 20 minutes to go. Now, in short, consumer attention is shrinking, and how good marketers are at capturing attention through advertising has a direct impact on their potential to grow relationships with consumers. For example, for Coca-Cola for about 5 years ago. Now, I've seen it a few times and have to admit it looks pretty decent on a big screen. But increasingly, brands now need to adapt their storytelling according to whatever device a consumer is using at any given moment and adapt their formats accordingly. What works for one environment definitely doesn't work for all. And getting this story right is actually really hard. The creative challenges alone are hard enough, but even if you can get this part right, from a digital marketing perspective, you still need to ask a few fundamental questions. Was my ad seen? Did it even have an opportunity to be seen? Did it capture the consumer's attention? And crucially, did it We'll address some solutions to these questions in just a moment, but ultimately, the
Andy, we're getting a little bit of problem with the network. So maybe, do you want to switch your video off and continue speaking?
Yeah, sure. Let me try that. Apologies. Here we go. Let me know if you have any more problems, Shiny.
Absolutely. This looks perfect.
Thank you. So as mentioned, we'll address some of the solutions to these questions in just a moment, but ultimately the media we consume and the way we consume it is a reflection of how we feel and what we're doing at any given moment in time. Marketers have started to realize that in order to truly capture attention, their goal is to reach people at distinct moments across a spectrum of unique circumstances and mindsets. Okay, so we've covered a bunch of challenges which arguably don't become any simpler in a post-cookie world. But let's take a look at how we can still successfully unlock insights in the new reality of digital. At Oracle Data Cloud, we believe that if you want to make brand advertising effective online, first of all, we have to start from a foundation of trust. And some of the most critical areas where data can improve trust in online advertising are in helping to clean up some of the ugly elements of digital, namely fraud, viewability, and brand safety. Fraud, viewability, and brand safety are challenges endemic to digital advertising, and there's a lot of money at stake. We know, for example, that billions of dollars are lost to bot fraud every year, an estimated $5.8 billion globally in 2018. Moat Analytics also shows us that 1/3 of online ads don't even appear on a user's screen, which means that in a $1 million campaign, $330,000 are wasted impressions. And finally, just over half of all digital brands, global brands, have asserted that brand safety is an issue they've experienced firsthand. I'll highlight a couple of examples for you shortly. We also believe that the best way to create trust is through accuracy, which is why our solutions engineers work tirelessly to ensure that our products provide accurate and detailed measurement of the highest possible standards. In an industry where 3 clicks in every 10,000 impressions is considered the standard, it's imperative to have accurate analytics in place. A true line of sight into campaign measurement is no longer a nice to have, it's an absolute must have. And if virtually no one clicks on an ad, then how do you accurately determine whether it has any value? I'll show you a few metrics that can help to answer that question in the next few slides, but hopefully one thing we can all agree upon is this: if there's no view, then there's definitely no value. In essence, you either see the ad, like this lovely one here for Oracle Data Cloud, or you don't. And if you don't see the ad, then why should anyone pay for it? So this is one of the reasons that we publish the Moat quarterly benchmarks, which help brands, agencies, and publishers alike to compare the quality of their impressions versus an accurate and relevant industry standard. If you haven't seen these before, they're publicly available, and this slide provides a snapshot of some recent global viewability benchmarks we recorded in relation to the definition created by the Media Ratings Council for desktop, mobile web, and in-app. Now, in this example, the MRC definition determines that a desktop or mobile display ad needs to be served to a human, always a good start, and have at least 50% of its pixels on screen for at least 1 second to be deemed viewable. And the average benchmark for this standard globally currently around 58% and 55% respectively. For video ads, the MRC standards are pretty similar, although 50% of pixels need to be on screen for 2 continuous seconds. And as you can see, the global benchmarks are actually a little bit higher than they are for display. Now, I think where these benchmarks become really interesting and really useful is when you compare the global average with a specific region, or rather when you compare your own campaigns versus the average for a specific country. For India, for example, you can see there's not a great deal of deviation from the global benchmarks for display impressions. But there is quite a large discrepancy for video campaigns. On average, 16% less viewability in this market on desktop and 17% less viewability across mobile devices. We can also compare Moat quarterly benchmarks for what we call ad fraud performance. What's the average volume of impressions being served to invalid traffic across desktop, mobile web, or mobile in-app? Again, we can compare regional or campaign by campaign performance against global benchmarks. In this case, you can see that globally, one would expect a much higher rate of IVT on desktop than you would on mobile devices. And when you compare these global benchmarks versus India, then again, you'll only notice a small variance for desktop or mobile display and a marginally bigger increase for desktop video. But you should notice one slightly alarming number here. India is a mobile-first, video-first market, so it probably shouldn't come as any surprise to note a 335% increase in mobile video IVT versus global benchmarks. Unfortunately, we're not the only ones who know this is where a lot of the ad dollars are flowing, because fraudsters also know this too. Okay, so enough measurement side, and let's move swiftly onto the subject of sophisticated targeting of consumers in order to eliminate any further waste of ad spend. Or actually, we should probably call it the sophisticated selection of consumers, since, let's be honest, no one really wants to be targeted with advertising or anything else for that matter. So it's now extremely well documented, and there are many examples of recent or imminent changes to the industry which will disrupt the practice of ID-based targeting that relies on interest-based cookies. Fortunately, there are still plenty of other effective ways to make sure that ads are being shown to relevant audiences, and contextual intelligence is just one example of a data-driven solution that can deliver reach and relevance without relying on a cookie. Contextual advertising was the original form of digital ad targeting. And if you think back to the early days of targeting at the domain level, or even down to a site's technology section or sports section, this allowed advertisers to align with particular content, essentially now what we consider the most basic form of contextual targeting. However, we've seen the advertising landscape change drastically since the first digital ad in 1994. And in the space of nearly 30 years, technology has improved radically in certain areas, with the digital ecosystem evolving right alongside it. We've seen the number of people using the internet double since the early 2000s. We're on generation 12 of the iPhone, which originally launched in 2007. The GDPR and the CCPA came into place in Europe and the US. And as we saw on the last slide, Google recently announced that they would drop third-party cookies on Chrome in the next 2 years. Now, with all these changes we're facing as an industry, we're constantly being forced to adjust to an ever-evolving landscape, but we still need to find ways to reach people that matter most to advertisers, to deliver messages that resonate and drive effective outcomes. Brands and agencies are facing a multitude of obstacles, including some of the things we've already discussed. Consumer attention spans are down to 8 seconds or earlier. A shift to first-party data strategies, both to prepare for the future and to build one-to-one connections. The GDPR and the CCPA both came into force in the past couple of years, with a host of other countries set to follow suit with similar legislation. And anti-tracking across the web is becoming more prevalent. At first it was Safari and Firefox, and now Chrome will soon drop their third-party cookies. So it's fair to say that as the landscape has changed, contextual intelligence is now more relevant than ever. As we start to understand the changing industry landscape better, we also see the need for contextual solutions to deliver against a diverse range of client needs. The requirement for more customized technology and actionable insights to drive strategic planning is growing sharply in importance amongst brands and agencies, with 90% intending to increase their budgets for contextual targeting this year, and essentially all brands agreeing that this type of technology is vital to ensure that they're using safe environments online. At Oracle Data Cloud, we believe that context can solve for a myriad of challenges. It's the baseline protection of a brand. It accurately defines the brand suitable approach that's custom made for a brand's specific needs and sensitivities. It delivers the scale needed to achieve client goals by connecting with cookieless web environments and through coverage of new formats like video. And it makes those important connections with an audience as you look to tap into their specific mindsets and life moments. In addition to targeting or selection, contextual intelligence can also keep your brand safe in digital. If we're talking about brand protection, Warren Buffett, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway and one of the most successful investors in the world, probably says it best. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. And here's an example of an unfortunate brand safety fail. Air China promoting their Diwali flight sale alongside an article describing a Lion Air plane crash, certainly the type of content they would have preferred to have avoided at all costs. Okay, finally, we'll wrap up this session with a quick overview of how sophisticated marketers can move beyond verification metrics to understand the true impact of their advertising campaigns. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, verification is not a standard for success. It's the necessary baseline for measurement. But in order to raise the bar, we have to go further. Let's break this down. There's no disputing that verification is the baseline that gives ads a chance to succeed, but it's the impact after the ad is seen that matters most. And quite simply, there can't be any impact unless an ad is valid, which essentially means it needs to be served to a real human being. An ad also needs to be brand safe, meaning it needs to be served in a suitable environment which is defined and controlled by each individual brand. And it should absolutely have the opportunity to be seen, i.e. in-screen and above the fold. But we can't stop there. We need to understand what we're getting in terms of attention signals and start asking questions such as whether users pay attention differently on one platform versus another, for example. In addition, do we understand what contextual environments are most effective for creating impact with a relevant audience? And what creative messaging wins the most attention amongst the brand's audience? And as mentioned, ultimately, are we driving consumers towards meaningful outcomes? In essence, we understand that once marketers know what works, they can make better decisions, but not one signal alone can tell the complete attention journey that consumers experience when they're exposed to advertising campaigns. Whilst measurement was always one of the original advantages of digital, in today's marketing landscape, this remains more true than ever. So to optimize towards attention, you have to track attention in all its forms, whether that's aggregate time on screen, interaction rates, video completion or audibility, the screen real estate of an ad, the performance across platforms and channels, the creative effectiveness, or even engagement by content category. A quick and shameless plug here, but Moat Analytics tracks over 200 different metrics, including all of the above and many more. Anyway, these are the questions that our partners want to ask, and they can only ask these questions if they can trust the media they're measuring and if they have truly strong analytics that go much further than verification to bring it all together. The savviest advertisers are already using these attention signals to build brand new standards. One of our partners, a financial services brand, realized that valid, viewable, and brand safe doesn't move them any closer to achieving their real business objectives. So they look to us to determine what metrics might lead to their KPIs, which in one particular case was online credit card applications. We worked with their data science team and provided log-level data that helped the brand uncover 3 distinct metrics that correlated with valuable user signups: time on screen, real estate, and interaction rate. Now, this brand is successfully optimizing against these identified metrics in their programmatic media buys and pushing new boundaries against their KPIs. So just to wrap up, we believe there's amazing opportunities for those marketers who have like-for-like measurement across everything they buy: web, in-app, social, video, audio, and other emerging formats. Brands and agencies should have reliable access to in-depth measurement across campaigns, and premium publishers should also be able to see across these environments to consistently report on and improve how their inventory holds consumer attention. I think, Shiny, that pretty much covers everything for this first session of today. But how are we doing for time? And do we have...
Thank you, Adi. I think we have time for a couple of questions, so we can take them quickly. That was a really good presentation. You want to switch on your camera now so people can see you?
Absolutely, here we are.
Awesome. So let me read out these questions for you. First one is, should the goal be to have 0% invalid traffic on all my campaigns? Is that even realistic?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Great question. I think getting closer to 0% is definitely the type of trend you're looking for. But will you ever see 0% across all of your media partners and all of your campaigns? It's really unlikely. And the reason for that is that not all invalid traffic is pure fraud. Some invalid traffic is actually just part of the way that the internet's designed. For example, there's bots and crawlers that serve a specific and, to be fair, legitimate purpose, which might show up as traffic. And whilst it's invalid traffic in the sense that it's not human traffic, it's not necessarily fraud that's been created by some bad actor to scam you or something. This type of invalid traffic that's not fraudulent, we call general invalid traffic, and a certain amount of that has got to be expected. Sophisticated invalid traffic is probably the one that we want to dial down to 0 or near 0. That's invalid traffic that's purposefully been set up to cost advertisers money.
Absolutely. I think makes sense. You know, there may be people who are your consumers that you're not even aware of, are potential consumers. So don't lose out on that. So one more question and very interesting points on viewability. So Rohan asked me, what is the best way to start increasing viewability? Where to start?
Where to start? I'd say the best way to get started is to start measuring the viewability of your current campaigns. There's an old saying in business management that you can't manage what you can't measure. And the same is absolutely true for media KPIs. I'd say that step 1 is to start measuring viewability to understand your current baseline. And then step 2 is to work with your media partners to challenge them to help you to increase those viewability rates. Now, you might find that certain partners or certain formats are better or worse in terms of viewable impressions, but honest conversations are really important and would make this whole process so much more productive. I think there's another tool that you can employ, which is called pre-bid viewability, which gives you the option to only bid on inventory that's been pre-scanned to have a certain viewability likelihood. Now, pre-bid segments can dramatically improve viewability in programmatic campaigns, and of course, having pre-bid segments available on most demand-side platforms.
Sorry,
are you still there, Shiny?
Yes. So I think that's all the time that we had. We will reach out to you offline with more questions and reach out to Oracle for more quality advertising. So thank you so much. This was an eye-opening session. It was lovely to have you with us today.
It was great to be here. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll listen into the rest of today's sessions with interest.
Thank you so much.